Have you ever seen a picture-perfect family and wondered what secrets they hide behind closed doors? For Sarah Miller, the cracks in her perfect life weren't just showing they were about to cause a seismic earthquake in a public courtroom. Her husband, Mark, a man who had everything demanded full custody of their children, parading his pregnant mistress as proof of his stability. He thought he had the perfect plan, the perfect new family. But he never imagined that his wife, the woman he tried to break, was holding a secret so devastating it would not only cost him his children, but expose a betrayal that no one, not even the judge, saw coming. The Millers were the kind of family that could have been plucked from a catalogue for suburban bliss. Their home, a handsome two-story colonial on a tree-lined street in Charlotte, North Carolina, was a testament to their success. Manicured lawns, a slate-grey porch with a welcoming swing and 2 expensive halls in the driveway, a sleek black BMW. For him, a practical but luxurious SUV for her. Inside the story continued. Photos adorned the mantelpiece Mark with his effortlessly confident smile and sharp blue eyes. Sarah, her warm, genuine beauty radiating beside him. And their 2 children, 10-year-old Lily and 7-year-old Leo, both with their father's eyes and their mother's gentle spirit. To the outside world, Mark Miller was the ideal husband and father. He was a partner at a prestigious downtown investment firm, a man whose ambition was matched only by his charisma. He coached Leo's soccer team on Saturdays and never missed Lily's dance recitals. He brought Sarah flowers for no reason and spoke of her with a reverence that made other women envious. Sarah, for her part, had orchestrated this beautiful life. She'd put her own career as a graphic designer on hold to raise the children, a decision she'd made willingly, believing she was investing in the most important venture of all her family. She was the PTA mom, the one who baked cupcakes for school events, the one whose home was the favorite for sleepovers. She loved Mark with a quiet, steady devotion, believing the foundation they had built over 15 years was unshakable. The first crack was almost imperceptible. It wasn't a loud shattering, but a subtle hairline fracture. It started with the late nights at the office. A big merger, Mark would explain, his voice tired over the phone. "You know how it is, honey. Just a few more weeks of this grind." Sarah, ever supportive, would keep his dinner warm and nod understandingly. But the weeks turned into months. The fatigue in his voice was replaced by a strange new energy she couldn't quite place. Then came the phone. It was a new constant appendage, always angled away from her screen, down on the counter. A text would buzz, and he'd snatch it up with a speed that felt jarringly reflexive. "Work," he'd mutter, his thumb flying across the screen. He started taking calls on the patio, the glass door sliding shut behind him, his words a low, indistinct murmur against the evening sounds of crickets. Sarah tried to ignore the cold knot of dread forming in her stomach. She was being paranoid, she told herself. He was under pressure. This was what marriage was, weathering the stressful seasons. She threw herself into planning a surprise weekend trip to the mountains, a chance for them to reconnect away from the demands of work and city life. When she presented him with the booked cabin confirmation, he barely looked up from his laptop. "That's great, honey, but this quarter is brutal." "Absolutely no way I can get away," he said, his tone flat, dismissive. He didn't see the flicker of hurt in her eyes, or if he did, he chose to ignore it. The cabin was cancelled. The distance grew into a chasm. The casual touches that had once defined their relationship, a hand on the small of her back as they passed in the kitchen, his arm around her on the sofa, vanished. He began to find fault in small things, the way she loaded the dishwasher, a bill she'd forgotten to pay the clutter in the mudroom. It was as if he were building a wall, brick by brick, with every little criticism. Her brother-in-law, David, saw it. David was Mark's younger brother, the quieter, more artistic counterpart to Mark's corporate swagger. He was a carpenter, his hands calloused and capable, his demeanor gentle. He and Sarah had always shared an easy friendship, a bond forged over a shared sense of being slightly on the outside of Mark's dazzling orbit. "Is he all right?" David asked her one afternoon, after he'd stopped by to fix a sticking door. Mark had just breezed in and out, grabbing a set of golf clubs and leaving with a cursory nod. "He's just stressed with work," Sarah replied, the excuse sounding hollow even to her own ears. David looked at her, his expression full of a sympathy she wasn't ready to accept. "Stress doesn't make you a stranger in your own home, Sarah. The undeniable proof came on a Tuesday. Mark had told her he was flying to Atlanta for a 2-day conference. She was doing laundry when she emptied the pockets of the jeans he'd worn the previous day. Among the receipts for coffee and a pack of gum was a credit card slip. It wasn't from an airport lounge or a business hotel. It was from a place called the Crimson Orchid, a notoriously expensive and intimate cocktail bar in their own city. The date stamp was from the night before at 11:30 p.m. He was supposed to have been at home packing and preparing for his early flight. Sarah sank onto the laundry room floor, the flimsy piece of paper trembling in her hand. The cold knot in her stomach turned into a sickening, icy certainty. The late nights, the secretive calls, the emotional distance, it wasn't about a merger. It was about a woman. Every excuse, every lie he had ever told her, coalesced into a single devastating truth. He wasn't just distant. He was living a different life, one she had no part in. The polished veneer of her perfect family had just been scorched away, revealing the rot underneath. The discovery of the receipt didn't unleash a torrent of rage in Sarah. Instead, a chilling, methodical calm settled over her. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Her mind was already shifting into a mode of self-preservation. For years, she had been a wife. Now she needed to be a detective. Mark returned from his Atlanta trip, bearing gifts for the kids and a duty-free perfume for her. He played the part of the returning husband, perfectly kissing her cheek and asking about her few days. The scent of the expensive perfume mingled with the faint, unfamiliar floral notes on his collar, and Sarah had to physically stop herself from recoiling. She smiled, a brittle, fragile thing, and thanked him. That night, she waited until the house was silent, the rhythmic breathing of her children, the only sound. She crept into Mark's home office. For years, she had respected his privacy, but privacy was a privilege of trust, and trust had been incinerated. His laptop was password protected, but his tablet, which he used more casually, was not. Her hands shook as she opened his email. It didn't take long. Buried in a promotions folder was a string of emails from a name she didn't recognize, Jessica Peterson. The subject lines were innocuous enough. Thursday, quick question, link you wanted, but the content was anything but. They were filled with inside jokes, flirtatious banter, and intimate plans. Can't wait to have you all to myself again. Last night was incredible, Em. Counting down the seconds. That tie I bought you. Wear it Thursday. I want to be the one to take it off. Then she found it. A hotel confirmation. The Evergreen Resort, a boutique spa 2 hours away. It was for the upcoming weekend. The one he'd claimed was blocked for a mandatory corporate retreat. The reservation was for the honeymoon suite. The name on the booking alongside Mark Miller was Jessica Peterson. A wave of nausea washed over Sarah. She scrolled through the emails, her heart pounding a painful rhythm against her ribs. Jessica, she gathered, was a junior analyst at his firm. Young, ambitious, and based on a photo attached to one email, stunningly beautiful in a sharp, modern way that made Sarah suddenly feel dated and soft. The final brutal blow was a link to a public photo gallery. It was from a recent company awards dinner. There were dozens of pictures of Mark at the podium, accepting an award, looking powerful and charming. And in the background of several shots, and in one candid photo at a table, was Jessica. She was looking at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. In one photo, his hand was resting on her back, his fingers possessively splayed. It was so public, so brazen. He wasn't just cheating, he was flaunting it. Sarah closed the tablet, a bitter, metallic taste in her mouth. The calm had evaporated, replaced by a deep, shuddering pain. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was a parallel life, a calculated deception that had been going on for months, perhaps longer. Every I love you, every shared smile over the dinner table for the past year, now felt like a performance, a cruel mockery of the life she thought she had. She decided against a midnight confrontation. She needed to be strategic. The next day, she called a friend, a paralegal named Maria, and asked for a recommendation for the best divorce attorney in Charlotte. Not just good Maria. Sarah specified, her voice low and steady. I need a shark. Armed with the name Eleanor Vance. Sarah began quietly preparing. She photographed the emails on the tablet. She made copies of their financial statements, tax returns, and investment portfolios. She documented every late night, every excuse, every lie in a dated journal. She was building an arsenal. The confrontation happened a week later, on a Sunday evening. The kids were at her mother's for the night. The house was quiet. Mark was in the living room, watching golf, a glass of scotch in his hand. Sarah walked in and turned off the television. He looked up annoyed. Hey, I was watching that. We need to talk, Mark, she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. Can it wait? It's the final round. No, she said. It can't. Who is Jessica Peterson? The reaction was instantaneous and telling. A flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly masked by indignation. What are you talking about? She's just a colleague from work. He was already reaching for his gaslighting playbook. Have you been snooping, Sarah? That's a serious breach of trust. Don't you dare talk to me about trust. She shot back, her voice rising. Don't you dare. I know about the Crimson Orchid. I know about the Atlanta conference that never happened. And I know about your romantic getaway to the Evergreen Resort this weekend. The color drained from his face. The smugness vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. He had been caught, and without his shield of lies, his true nature emerged. Fine, he spat, standing up. You want to know, fine. Yes, I'm seeing someone. Her name is Jessica. He said it with a defiant cruelty, as if daring her to react. The blunt confession, devoid of any remorse, was more painful than the lies. Why, Mark? She whispered, the fight draining out of her. After 15 years, our family. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Our family. Look at us, Sarah. This is a sham. We've been roommates for years. I've been suffocating. I want a life. I want passion, excitement. Jessica gives me that. She sees me for who I am, not just as a walking ATM and a handyman. Every word was a calculated blow designed to wound, to shift the blame. He was rewriting their entire history to justify his betrayal. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're just throwing us away. There's nothing left to throw away." He said, his voice like ice. "It's over, Sarah. It's been over for a long time. I want a divorce. And since you've been snooping, you might as well know the rest. Jessica is pregnant. We're going to be a family, a real happy family." The room tilted. Pregnant. The word echoed in the suffocating silence. It wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. He hadn't just built a new life. He had created a new family to supplant the old one. Sarah stared at the man she had loved, the father of her children, and saw only a stranger, a cruel, remorseless stranger who had just declared war. The days that followed were a blur of hollowed-out shock and frantic activity. The word divorce hung in the air of their beautiful home, a toxic pollutant that choked the life out of every room. Mark moved into the guest bedroom, a silent, hostile presence at the other end of the hall. He spoke to Sarah only when necessary, his words clipped and cold. He was waiting for her to break, to beg to dissolve into the hysterical woman he was already painting her to be. But Sarah, guided by the steely advice of her new attorney, Eleanor Vance, did not break. Eleanor was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes, an impeccably tailored suit, and a reputation for being unshakable. "Do not engage. Do not argue. Document everything," she had instructed during their first meeting. "He has drawn the battle lines. Our job is to be smarter and more prepared." The first official salvo came a week later. A courier delivered a thick manila envelope. Inside, nestled amongst the initial divorce filings, was a motion for temporary full physical and legal custody of Lily and Leo. Sarah read the document, and the air left her lungs. It wasn't a standard filing. It was a character assassination. Mark, through his high-priced lawyer, a slick downtown shark named Robert Harrison, had crafted a narrative that painted Sarah as an unstable, negligent, and emotionally volatile mother. The motion cited her erratic behavior, in recent months her paranoid accusations and obsessive snooping. It mentioned her decision to be a stay-at-home mother, not as a sacrifice, but as a sign of her lack of ambition and worldly connection, suggesting she was an unfit role model. It twisted her grief and anxiety over his affair into a portrait of mental instability, even referencing a therapist she had seen briefly 2 years ago for stress management as evidence of a pre-existing psychological condition. The most venomous part was the conclusion. "Mr. Miller," it read, "is prepared to offer the children a stable, loving, and financially secure two-parent home with his new partner, Ms. Jessica Peterson, who is expecting their first child. He seeks to remove the children from the chaotic and emotionally damaging environment created by their mother's current state and provide them with the consistency they desperately need." It was a masterpiece of cruelty, designed to terrify her into submission. He was using their children as the ultimate weapon, and his new pregnant mistress as his trump card. Sarah felt a rage so pure and hot it nearly consumed her. He was going to stand in a courtroom and claim that the woman he cheated with was a better mother than the woman who had dedicated the last decade of her life to raising their children. The house became a cold war zone. Mark began a campaign of psychological warfare. He would talk loudly on the phone to Jessica within earshot of Sarah, using saccharine pet names and talking about their future baby's nursery. He would accidentally leave his tablet open to websites for strollers and baby furniture. He bought Lily and Leo expensive gifts, a new gaming console, a designer doll subtly positioning himself as the fun, benevolent parent, while Sarah was the one enforcing homework and bedtimes, her face etched with a constant weary sadness. The children were caught in the crossfire, their confusion and pain a tangible presence. "Why is Daddy sleeping in the guest room?" Leo asked one night, his small face crumpled with worry. "Is he mad at us?" "No, sweetie, of course not," Sarah reassured him, her heart breaking. "Grown-ups just have some things to figure out sometimes." Lily, older and more perceptive, was withdrawn and quiet. Sarah would find her sitting by her window, staring out at the street. She knew her daughter overheard the clipped, angry whispers, felt the glacial tension that had replaced the warmth in their home. David, Mark's brother, became Sarah's only lifeline. He was appalled by his brother's actions. He called Mark, and Sarah could hear the shouting through the closed office door. "Full custody? Are you insane?" David's voice roared. "After what you did, you're going to drag those kids through hell and try to take them from their mother." Mark's response was lower, but the smug confidence was unmistakable. David stormed out of the house later, his face flushed with anger. He looked at Sarah, his expression a mixture of fury and helplessness. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't even know who he is anymore," he said, shaking his head. "It's like the money and the power finally rotted him from the inside out. Whatever you need, I'm here. I'll testify for you. I'll tell the court what a dedicated mother you are." Sarah was deeply grateful for his support, a small island of loyalty in an ocean of betrayal. The preliminary hearing was set. Eleanor Vance prepped her. "Harrison will throw everything at you. He'll try to get under your skin to make you emotional in front of the judge. Don't take the bait. Be calm, be factual, be the mother you are. Let Mark be the villain. He's playing the part beautifully." The night before the hearing, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, the house dark and silent, clutching a framed photo from the mantelpiece. It was from a family vacation to the beach 5 years ago. Mark was holding Leo on his shoulders, both of them laughing. Sarah was holding Lily's hand. Her face turned towards them, beaming with pure happiness. It felt like a photo of a different family from a different lifetime. She wasn't just fighting for her children anymore. She was fighting against the complete erasure of her life, of her value, of the truth. Mark and Jessica and their unborn child were a symbol of the future he wanted. A future built on a foundation of lies, a future he was willing to pave over the ruins of his own family. As she sat there in the dark, Sarah made a vow. He would not succeed. She didn't know how, but she would not let him win. The weeks preceding the custody hearing were a form of slow torture, a psychological war waged within the walls of Sarah's own home. Mark had transformed their beautiful colonial into a Cold War zone with invisible lines drawn across thresholds and silences that screamed louder than any argument. He operated with a chillingly deliberate cruelty, designed to unmoor her, to turn her into the hysterical woman his lawyers were describing in their filings. One Saturday morning, the assault was particularly brazen. Sarah was making pancakes a weekend ritual she clung to for the children's sake, when Mark strode into the kitchen, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. He ignored her, completely ruffling Leo's hair. "Morning, champ." "Morning, Lilybug," he said, his voice booming with manufactured cheer. "I was thinking, the BMW is great, but with the new baby coming, we're going to need more room. What do you guys think about a big new Escalade?" "With TVs in the back?" Lily's eyes widened, but she glanced nervously at her mother. Leo, however, was immediately hooked. A real Escalade cool. Yeah, Mark continued, pouring himself coffee and leaning against the counter, a king in his castle. We'll need a good spot for the car seat, of course. Lily, you're old enough now to help out with a baby brother, right? It'll be fun. A bigger family. Sarah's hand froze above the sizzling pan. The spatula felt impossibly heavy. He was discussing the logistics of his new family with their children right in front of her, as if she were a ghost. He was methodically erasing her, replacing her with a newer model, and inviting her own children to watch. She could feel the hot sting of tears, but she blinked them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She just flipped a pancake, the scraping sound of metal on cast iron, the only reply. It was during these nightmarish days that David became her anchor in a churning sea. Mark's younger brother was a study in contrasts to the man Mark had become. Where Mark was polished and cold, David was solid and warm. His hands calloused from his carpentry work, his eyes full of a genuine, pained empathy. He was at the house, often his presence a quiet act of rebellion against his brother. I talked to him again last night, David told her one afternoon, his voice low and tight with fury. They were sitting at the kitchen table while the kids were at a friend's house. It's like talking to a stranger. He has this chilling justification for everything. He's convinced himself that you're unstable, that taking the kids is some kind of noble act. He was always competitive, Sarah, but I never thought he was cruel. This is something else. He's trying to erase you. His loyalty was a balm on her raw nerves. He would fix a loose cabinet hinge, help Leo build a diorama for school, or simply sit with her sharing a pot of tea. His steady presence, a temporary shield against the storm. He was the only one who saw her, not as Mark's unstable ex-wife, but as Sarah, the woman his brother had wronged so terribly. But as the hearing date loomed closer, a subtle discordant note began to play in David's behavior. The steady anchor began to drift. A haunted look entered his eyes, a familiar furtiveness she recognized with a sickening lurch of her stomach. He started canceling their plans at the last minute. Sorry, a client has a rush job. He'd text the excuse, feeling thin. One evening, he was over for dinner, and as he was helping clear the table, his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up for a fraction of a second, but it was long enough for Sarah to see the name on the text notification, Jess. David snatched the phone with a panicked speed that was far too revealing. He fumbled with it, his face flushing a deep red. Jess, he stammered, not looking at her. My lumber supplier, Jessup Wood. They found that maple I was looking for. The lie was clumsy, pathetic, and utterly transparent. There was no Jessup Wood. She knew all his suppliers. The cold dread that had been her constant companion for months found a new target. Her mind, rewired by Mark's betrayal, began to spin with terrible possibilities. Was David playing her? Was he a spy for his brother, gathering information? Or was it something else? Something even more tangled and unthinkable? She hated the suspicion, hated that Mark's poison had tainted the one relationship she thought was safe. But she could no longer afford to be naive. Trust was a luxury she had lost. The breaking point came on a Thursday. David called her, his voice strained. He said he had to drive across town to a specialty lumber yard in the industrial district to look at some reclaimed oak. He sounded agitated, and the excuse felt rehearsed. A desperate, ugly need for the truth, for any solid ground at all, overtook her. Once the school bus had collected Lily, and Leo Sarah got into her SUV. her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a profound sense of shame, as if she were the one committing a betrayal. But the not knowing was worse. She drove to a vantage point near the lumberyard, her stomach in knots. A few minutes later, David's familiar beat-up Ford truck rumbled past, but it didn't slow down. It bypassed the lumberyard entirely and continued on, heading toward a part of the city she didn't know well, a newer, more anonymous area filled with sprawling modern apartment complexes, places built for transient lives and secrets. Her hands tightening on the steering wheel, she followed. The act felt surreal, like something out of a movie. This wasn't her life. Her life was carpools and parent-teacher conferences. But it was her life now. It was a life of following people and uncovering lies. David's truck turned into the visitor parking lot of a large, sterile complex called the Viridian. He killed the engine and sat for a long moment, his head resting against the steering wheel, as if gathering the strength for an ordeal. He finally got out, looked around with a nervous, guilty energy, and disappeared through the building's main glass doors. Sarah parked across the street, her mind a frantic storm of questions. An hour crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. She was about to give up, to chalk it up to her own festering paranoia, when the glass doors swung open again. David emerged. And he was not alone. The woman beside him was instantly recognizable, even from a distance. It was Jessica Peterson. And she was heavily, undeniably pregnant, the swell of her belly straining against the fabric of a simple t-shirt. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to tilt and blur at the edges. This wasn't right. The image didn't make sense. They weren't smiling. They weren't friendly. They stood just outside the entrance, their bodies rigid with tension. Jessica's arms were wrapped around her stomach, a gesture that was both protective and defensive. David's face was a mask of pure anguish. He was gesturing with his hands, his posture pleading. They were in the middle of a desperate, heated argument. 1,000 scenarios exploded in Sarah's mind, each one more painful than the last. Was David confronting her on Sarah's behalf? Was he threatening her? Or was this something far worse? She had to know. She couldn't build her fight on a foundation of half-truths. Her eyes darted around, looking for cover. A large, overgrown privet hedge near the building's entrance offered a screen. Feigning a phone call, she got out of her car, her legs feeling unsteady. She walked down the sidewalk, her voice a low murmur into the dead phone, keeping her head down until she was close enough, shielded by the leafy branches. The wind carried their words to her in sharp, devastating fragments. "No other way, David. It's too late now." Jessica's voice was thin and frayed with panic. "He's all in. He thinks this baby is his redemption." Redemption? David's voice was a raw, agonized whisper. "It's not redemption. It's a lie. We can't let him do this. We can't let him stand up in court and take Sarah's kids away, using our baby as his weapon." Our baby. The two words did not register in her brain so much as they detonated in her soul. A wave of vertigo washed over her, and she physically stumbled, her hand bracing against the rough brick of the hedge's retaining wall. The world went silent, the sounds of the traffic and life fading into a distant hollow roar. Our baby. Not Mark's and Jessica's. David's and Jessica's. The kind, supportive brother. The righteous, angry friend. Her rock. Her anchor. It was all a lie of such profound and grotesque complexity that it almost defied belief. His support for her wasn't just loyalty. It was penance. His anger at Mark wasn't just for her. It was the fury of a man watching a thief prepare to steal something precious that he himself had already abandoned. "Mark will destroy you." Jessica was sobbing now, her words choked. "He'll destroy us both. If you tell him now, after all this, and what if I don't?" David shot back, his voice cracking with a pain so deep it was visceral. "What's the alternative to let our son call my brother Dad? To stand by and watch the only good woman I've ever known lose her children because of a mess I helped create. I can't live with that, Jess. I can't." Sarah backed away from the hedge, her movements stiff and robotic. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of her own shattered life. She made it back to her car, her mind a maelstrom of shock, betrayal, and a sudden, terrifyingly clear vision of the path forward. She had been searching for a shield, a small piece of leverage to protect her children. Instead, she had just been handed a nuclear bomb. The lie was the foundation of Mark's entire case, and she now held the detonator. She drove home in a complete daze, the familiar streets of her neighborhood looking alien and strange. When she walked into her empty house, she went straight to the phone and called her attorney. Her hand was trembling, but her voice when she spoke was as cold and steady as steel. "Eleanor," she said, "it's Sarah Miller. Something has happened. The case. It has completely changed. We need to meet, right now." The courtroom felt like a tomb. It was a space designed to intimidate and diminish, with its towering mahogany-paneled walls and oil portraits of stern-faced judges from decades past. Sarah felt the chill of the polished marble floor through the thin soles of her shoes. The air thick with the scent of old paper, lemon-scented floor wax, and collective anxiety seemed to hum with the low, oppressive drone of the building's ventilation system. On the other side of the center aisle, an impassable chasm sat Mark. He wasn't just wearing a suit, he was wearing armor. It was a custom-tailored dark navy wool, sharp at the shoulders and cinched perfectly at the waist, designed to project an image of unassailable authority and success. Beside him, his attorney, Robert Harrison, shuffled papers with a practiced, almost bored confidence. He was a predator, at rest, comfortable in his natural habitat. A few rows behind them, Jessica Peterson was a strategic splash of color in the sea of somber tones. She wore a butter-yellow maternity dress, a soft, innocent color that framed her pregnant belly as a beacon of life and hope. It was a costume Sarah knew as carefully chosen as Mark's suit. She was there to be Exhibit A, in the case for Mark's wholesome, stable future. And in the very back, a solitary figure, hunched in the shadows of the public gallery, was David. He looked like he had aged a decade in a month. His usual easy posture was gone, replaced by a tense, broken slump. He stared at the scuffed toes of his work boots, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He was a man carrying a weight so heavy it threatened to pulverize him. Sarah sat beside Eleanor Vance, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. Eleanor, a pillar of calm in her charcoal grey suit, gave her a brief, reassuring nod. "Deep breaths," she murmured just as the bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise." The Honourable Judge Amelia Davies entered, her black robes sweeping behind her. She was a woman in her 60s, whose face seemed carved from granite, her eyes missing nothing. She settled into her high-backed chair, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on the petitioner's table. "Mr. Harrison, you may begin." Robert Harrison rose with a fluid reptilian grace. "Thank you, Your Honor. The petitioner calls Mr. Mark Miller to the stand." Mark walked to the witness box with the confident stride of a man accustomed to being the center of attention. After being sworn in, he settled into the chair, adjusting his jacket and directing a look of solemn gravity toward the judge. For the next hour, Harrison led him through a masterful performance. Mark spoke of his love for Lily and Leo, his voice thick with perfectly timed emotion. He recounted anecdotes of fatherly devotion coaching soccer games, helping with impossible math homework, reading bedtime stories. Then Harrison guided him gently toward the crux of his argument. "Mr. Miller, this must be incredibly difficult. Can you please describe for the court the changes you observed in your wife's behavior that led you to believe your children were in an unhealthy environment?" Mark sighed a long, mournful exhalation of feigned regret. He looked at Sarah, not with anger, but with a carefully practiced pity. It was a slow decline. He began his voice low and sorrowful. Sarah became fragile, prone to bouts of deep melancholy one moment, and then sudden angry outbursts the next. I'd come home from a 16-hour day at the office to find her weeping, but she couldn't tell me why. Then she started making these wild accusations. He leaned forward as if sharing a painful confidence with the judge. There was one night in particular. Leo had a slight fever. Nothing serious, but Sarah convinced herself it was something terrible. She was up all night, pacing, frantic. When I tried to calm her down, to tell her it was normal for a child to get a small fever, she accused me of not caring. She started screaming that I was an absent father, that I wished he were sicker so I could have a real reason to miss work. She said it all right in the hallway, loud enough for Lily to hear from her bedroom. It was an uncontrollable, emotional breakdown over nothing. I realized then that the children were being exposed to a level of instability that was truly damaging. A wave of hot, disorienting rage washed over Sarah. He had taken a moment of genuine maternal worry, a night she had been anxious because he had been unreachable on his phone for hours, and twisted it into a portrait of a mad woman. The blood rushed in her ears. She felt a primal urge to leap to her feet and scream the truth, but Eleanor's hand landed gently on her forearm, a silent, steadying pressure that anchored her to the chair. Harrison let the image hang in the air before moving to his triumphant conclusion. "And now, Mr. Miller, you are building a new life. Tell the court about your partner, Ms. Peterson." Mark's face softened. He turned his gaze to the back of the courtroom, finding Jessica and offering a small protective smile. "Jessica is my rock. She is the kindest, most stable person I have ever known. She has brought peace and light back into my life. And as the court knows, we are expecting a child, a son." His voice cracked and he paused, dabbing a finger at the corner of his eye. "All I want is to give my children, Lily and Leo, the home they deserve. A calm, loving, two-parent home. I want to welcome them into our growing family and give them a happy, peaceful life." The performance was breathtaking in its audacity. He was the valiant savior rescuing his children from a volatile mother. When he was done, a heavy silence filled the room. Judge Davies made a note on her pad, her face as impassive as ever. "Miss Vance, your witness." Eleanor rose, her movements deliberate. She approached the witness stand not as an attacker, but as a seeker of simple clarifications. "Mr. Miller," she began, her tone conversational, "you've painted a very clear picture of your dedication as a father. You testified you often work 16-hour days, correct? That's what it takes to provide for my family," he said, puffing his chest slightly. "Of course. And on the evening of May the 12th of last year, you told your wife you were working late on the Henderson acquisition, did you not?" Mark hesitated. "That sounds correct." But your American Express statement, which we have here as Exhibit B, shows a charge at 11:37 p.m. from a cocktail lounge called the Crimson Orchid. A very expensive, very intimate establishment, I believe. Was the Henderson acquisition meeting held in a bar? Mr. Miller, Harrison shot to his feet. Objection counsel is badgering the witness. He's the one who brought up his long work hours, Your Honor, Eleanor countered. I'm merely establishing a pattern. I'll allow it. Briefly, the judge clipped. Answer the question, Mr. Miller. Mark's jaw tightened. I may have stopped for a drink after work. With your colleague Jessica Peterson. His face went rigid. Yes. So you were not working late. You were lying to your wife while you were on a romantic rendezvous with your mistress. Is that correct? Objection. Sustained. The court will draw its own conclusions, Ms. Vance. Move on. Eleanor moved on relentlessly. She dismantled his narrative piece by piece, using his own financial records and phone logs to expose the web of deceit. With every question, Mark's polished veneer cracked a little more. His answers grew shorter, his confident posture tightened into a defensive clench. He was no longer the noble father. He was an adulterer, caught in a series of irrefutable lies. Finally, Eleanor paused, letting the weight of his exposed dishonesty settle over the courtroom. You testified that your wife's suspicions and accusations were signs of paranoia and instability. But given what we've just established, the constant lies, the secret meetings, the hidden life, don't you think intuition would be a more accurate word, Mr. Miller? Before Harrison could even object, Eleanor turned away. I have no further questions for this charlatan, Your Honor. A murmur went through the gallery. Harrison, looking rattled, stood quickly. The petitioner rests, Your Honor. Very well, Judge Davies said, turning to Eleanor. Ms. Vance, you may call your first witness. Thank you, Your Honor, Eleanor said, her voice suddenly ringing with a new and potent clarity. The defense calls Ms. Jessica Peterson to the stand. The announcement landed like a physical blow. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Mark's head whipped around his face, a thunderous mask of disbelief and fury directed at his lawyer. Harrison, for the first time that day, was utterly flummoxed, scrambling to his feet so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Objection, Your Honor. Strongest possible objection. Ms. Peterson is not on the defense's witness list. This is an ambush. It's prejudicial and a flagrant violation of discovery rules. Judge Davies held up a hand, silencing him. She looked at Eleanor, her eyes glinting with what might have been curiosity. Ms. Vance, Your Honor, Eleanor said calmly. Mr. Harrison and his client have made Miss Peterson and her unborn child the very cornerstone of their petition. They have presented her as the paragon of stability who justifies tearing 2 children from their mother. Her character, her situation, and her credibility are therefore not just relevant. They are the central issue before this court. We have a right to question the foundation upon which their entire case rests. The judge considered this for a long moment. The argument is sound. Your client made her relevant, Mr. Harrison. I'm allowing it. Objection overruled. Ms. Peterson, please approach the stand. Jessica looked as if she'd been struck. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted from Harrison to a seething Mark, who could offer her nothing but a helpless, furious glare. As if in a trance, she stood and made the long, lonely walk to the witness box, her hand protectively cradling her belly. After she was sworn in, Eleanor approached her, her demeanor softening from a prosecutor to a concerned aunt. Ms. Peterson, thank you for being here. That is a lovely dress. You look absolutely radiant." "Thank you," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. "Now, Mr. Miller has testified that you are expecting his child. A joyous occasion. Is that correct?" "Yes." Jessica managed her knuckles white where she gripped the stand. "And do you have an estimated due date?" December 5th. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully, making a small note on her legal pad. December 5th. So if we count back, that would place the date of conception somewhere in the middle of March, give or take a few days. Does that timeline sound correct to you? Jessica shifted the fabric of her yellow dress, crinkling. I think so. Yes. And where was Mr. Miller in the middle of March? Let's be specific. The week of March 14th through the 21st. Jessica's mind went blank. Panic began to cloud her eyes. She looked at Mark, a desperate, silent plea for help. I don't recall exactly. You don't? Eleanor asked, her voice still gentle. That seems like a rather important week for a couple conceiving their first child. Perhaps I can help refresh your memory. Eleanor walked back to her table, retrieved a thin file, and approached the clerk. Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence and Defense Exhibit A, the certified travel itinerary and expense reports for Mr. Mark Miller, provided under subpoena from his firm's corporate travel agency. She handed a copy to Harrison, whose face grew paler as he read it, and then placed another on the ledge of the witness box. Ms. Peterson, if you would please look at this document. It confirms that from March 14th to March 21st, Mr. Miller was attending an international finance summit in Singapore. Eleanor let the name of the city hang in the air, a final, fatal fact. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, broken only by the frantic rustle of paper as Harrison tried to find a counter-argument that didn't exist. Eleanor took a step closer to the stand, her voice dropping, losing all its warmth, and becoming as sharp and cold as a shard of ice. So let me ask you again, Miss Peterson, how is it possible that you conceived a child with Mr. Mark Miller in the middle of March when he was physically located on the other side of the planet? Jessica stared, trapped. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. Her mouth opened, then closed. A choked sob escaped her lips. Her eyes, swimming with tears, found Mark's, but his face was a canvas of dawning, horrified comprehension. And in that moment, something inside Sarah broke. The carefully constructed dam of her composure, holding back 15 years of love, a year of pain, and months of terror, shattered completely. She rose from her chair, not with a thought, but with a pure, physical imperative. All of Eleanor's warnings, all the strategy evaporated in a white-hot flash of truth. Your Honor! Sarah's voice rang out, trembling but clear, slicing through the suffocating tension. Every head in the room swiveled to face her. Your Honor, he cannot have custody of my children. Not based on a stable family that is a complete and utter lie. Mrs. Miller, you are out of order. Sit down immediately. Judge Davies's voice was like a thunderclap, her gavel cracking against the wood. But Sarah was beyond hearing it. The words tumbled out, fueled by a righteous fury she didn't know she possessed. The baby isn't his, she cried, her voice breaking on a sob of anguish and liberation. He's been lying to you, to this court. He's been lying to everyone. Chaos erupted. She's hysterical. You see, Judge, this is the instability I've been talking about, Mark shouted, leaping to his feet, his face a grotesque mask of purple rage and desperation. She's lost her mind. This is proof. Enough! Judge Davies's roar was formidable, a blast of pure authority that shocked the room into silence. She slammed her gavel down 3 times, the sound echoing like gunshots. Her glare, incandescent with fury, pinned Mark where he stood, then shifted to Sarah. "Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You have made an accusation of monumental proportions in my courtroom. You had better be able to substantiate it. Do you have one shred of proof?" Sarah's gaze, through her own tears, flickered from the judge's unforgiving face, past the wreckage of Mark and Jessica, to the lone, shattered figure in the back of the room. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with all the sorrow and certainty in the world. "Yes," she said, "he does." Every single person in the courtroom followed her gaze. The collective stare was a physical force, a spotlight that found and pinned David Miller to his seat. He visibly flinched, as if he'd been struck. The color drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, grayish white. He looked at his brother's stunned, betrayed face. He looked at Jessica, who was now openly weeping on the stand, her head in her hands. And then his eyes met Sarah's, and in that shared look was the entire sordid, heartbreaking story. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, David Miller pushed himself to his feet. He swayed slightly, his hands gripping the back of the polished wooden bench in front of him. When he spoke, his voice was a choked, broken thing, a confession torn from the depths of his soul. Yet it carried with devastating clarity into every corner of the silent room. "She's telling the truth," he rasped. "It's my baby." The detonation was complete. The sound of Mark's world imploding was a profound, deafening silence. The rage, the arrogance, the confident entitlement, it all vanished from his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, uncomprehending horror. He staggered backward and collapsed into his chair, not just a defeated litigant, but a man utterly annihilated, hollowed out by a truth more terrible than any lie he had ever told. The fallout from that courtroom confession was swift and total. Judge Davies, furious at the flagrant deception, dismissed Mark's custody petition with prejudice, meaning he could not file it again. In her scathing ruling, she cited his morally bankrupt scheme and perjury by omission. Sarah was granted sole temporary custody, and the path to a divorce settlement, heavily in her favor, was cleared. Mark Miller lost everything in a single afternoon: his claim to his children, his reputation, his brother, and the new family he thought was his salvation. He was a man adrift in the ruins of his own making, a public spectacle of humiliation. This wasn't a story with a happy ending, but one of raw, painful survival. Sarah won, but the victory tasted of ashes. Her family was irrevocably broken, scarred by layers of betrayal she was still struggling to comprehend. But as she walked out of that courthouse, holding the hands of Lily and Leo, she wasn't walking into darkness. She was walking into the light of truth, into a future she would build herself on her own terms, free from the suffocating weight of lies. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating secrets are the very keys that can set you free. What did you think of Sarah's incredible courage? Who do you think was the most betrayed person in this story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of strength and resilience, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will leave you speechless. Thank you for listening.